Doctors who've actually answered the question, is anyone here a doctor? What happened? Was on a flight to London and the call went out at 5:30 am. I went to the back of the plane as directed, and I eventually was told to go to the seat of a passenger. When I got to his seat, he was slow to respond to my questions, but he was alert and could tell me where he was and where we were going. Turns out he was a chronic opioid user for pain and uses benzodiazepines like Ativan for anxiety. Well, he is afraid to fly and anticipated that the rush through the airport would cause more pain, so naturally he doubles up on his opioids plus his Ativan, plus he decides to have a couple of drinks mid-flight. He was basically so drugged up that his seatmates thought he was having a stroke. The stewardesses asked me if I wanted the captain to land the plane, but because he wasn't in any danger and we were about an hour from London, we just carried on and monitored the man. Just a few days ago, though, I walked into a bank and noticed a man lying beside the ATM. There was someone at the other one who was acting like everything was normal. I told the bank attendant and we approached the guy. Turns out he was a chronic alcoholic who hadn't had a drink in a while and was in alcohol withdrawal and had a seizure shortly after arriving. I don't know how long he was lying there or why absolutely nobody made mention that there was a man on the ground with vomit beside him. People were walking past him like it was normal. Guy on a train was drunk and appeared to be in some distress and vomiting. When I got to the car, it was obvious to me that he was not vomiting because he was drunk. He was vomiting coffee ground emesis, an upper GI bleed. He was disoriented, likely for the same reason. The man was definitely not drunk. I turned him over to an ambulance at the next stop, spoke briefly with paramedics, and then got back on the train and continued to my mother's town. This was days after I graduated. I had not yet done a residency. Hasn't happened since. Not me, but I was volunteering at a race event. A man had just crossed the marathon finish line and went into cardiac arrest. While we were panicking and trying to get emergency services over, literally 2 seconds later, a whole race team of doctors/nurses and such crossed the finish line and saw what was happening. They sprang into action, and the guy ended up getting all the attention he needed and was fine in the end. It could not have been more fortuitous timing. It was almost comical. My son was playing baseball and took a hard grounder to the face. He was bleeding pretty bad, so the coach, another fellow, and I ran onto the field. The fellow said that he was a dentist and asked me if I was a doctor. I said, yeah, I have a PhD in physics. He kind of looked at me funny. Then we walked my son off the field. I didn't realize until later that he didn't know that I was the father, and he probably thought I was some smartass running on the field to offer medical help. Well, physics played a role in the injury, so. Not me but my mother. We were sitting in a high-speed train for 4 hours and reserved some seats for it. I saw a guy sitting opposite to us with a lot of folders, so I assumed he needed to do some paperwork for his job. After 2 hours they stopped the train suddenly and called for a doctor in our part of the train. The guy and my mother stand up in seconds and just look at each other with confusion. Him, what kind of doctor are you? Her, cardiologist. Him, oh thank God, I'm a gynecologist. Tell me if it is a birth. It was a metabolism issue. Nothing serious in the end. Nurse midwife, not a doctor. So whenever is there a doctor on board, call goes out, I lay low and hope someone more qualified volunteers. But twice I've admitted I'm a nurse and been drafted to help. Once was on a 10-hour red-eye flight. I'm still shocked that on a packed 747 I'm the best they could come up with. Fortunately it was just a woman having severe gas pains from sitting still too long and wearing Spanx. I told her to take off the Spanx and walk for a while. For my service I was given a little gift bag of snacks and alcohol, which was so nice, but kind of embarrassing. Another time was on a city bus and a man had a seizure. The driver stopped right at the corner adjacent to the local medical school. I thought surely there's some overzealous med student on board who wants to take this one, but no. I finally admitted I was a nurse when the poor driver started to look frantic. All I did was sit with the guy until the paramedics arrived and pointed out that his dentures had fallen on the ground. Obligatory not a doctor, but I was sat next to one on a plane from Shanghai to Detroit. About 2 hours into the flight, the announcement comes over the PA. The guy next to me sits bolt upright and looks around for a flight attendant. The look in his eyes said he had been waiting for this moment his entire professional life. Once the doctor business had been taken care of, the flight attendant stopped by periodically to give him updates and lots of free miles. Apparently it was a man in his 20s with a history of seizures that had never been to see a doctor about them. The older flight attendants proceeded to give the young man a stern talking to for the remainder of the flight. My wife responded to this on a flight with a Middle Eastern carrier. A passenger had collapsed on the flight. The crew would not let her see the patient, demanding her doctor's card first. This is not something the UK General Medical Council produces. Eventually, when no other option was available, my wife convinced them she is in fact a doctor and was allowed to check the passenger. He turned out to be diabetic and hypoglycemic, so quickly resolved, and a complete anticlimax. No, there was no special treatment for being a doctor or assisting, and the crew didn't even say thank you. Medical student here, whose dad's a doc and mom's a nurse. We've had multiple holidays where this happened. The thing that was the most impressive for me, however, was a holiday where I was 11 or so. We were swimming in an indoor pool. Dad was outside, mom was with me, and my little sister. All of a sudden people start screaming, and a 3-year-old toddler is pulled out of the water, blue and not breathing. Mom immediately started the Heimlich, upside down, to get the water out of the lungs, while my sister and I got Dad. By the time we got back, the kid was conscious and crying. Dad took him to the medic's cabin and had to literally convince the guy there to give the kid oxygen. Happy ending though, the kid made it without any brain damage. We still get a Christmas card every year. But yeah, that was a lot to take in as a kid. In my eyes, my parents will always be heroes for that. This will probably get buried, but I work in a dermatology office in a building full of family doctors, dentists, eye doctors, and physiotherapists. At the staff Christmas party one year, one of the spouses of a doctor had a heart attack. There were enough doctors and nurses present to take care of the issue very promptly, and the outcome was positive. At our dinner table, the dermatologists had all been drinking wine by this point, and yelled out, "Well, if anyone gets a rash, let us know." My mom's a doctor. Once I was getting the tube with her, and we heard over the intercom, "If there is a doctor in the station, can you please come up to group level?" And my mom just takes me, and we skedaddled up to the station in trance. Some guy had slipped back going up the escalator and smashed his head open. My mom and some others helped get him off the escalator and onto the main station floor, where my mom started treating him as best she could. An ambulance arrived like 2 minutes later, so my mom didn't get a chance to do much. We then had to go into a pret, so my mom could wash the blood off her hands, because the underground didn't let her use their staff toilets. It was kinda weird to see her just zoom into action. Flying to an island for a holiday a couple of years ago. The first call was, "Is there a physiotherapist on the plane?" Which was predictably followed a couple of minutes later by, "Is there a doctor?" A very nice lady had dislocated her prosthetic hip when the man in the seat in front of her reclined sharply into her, and she shuffled to adjust her position. She was in agony. The plane had a fairly decent medical kit, so I was able to get an fourth cannula into her and give her some reasonable painkillers. However, there was no chance of me popping the hip back in, and where we were going didn't really have a hospital, so I told the crew they'd have to land somewhere that did. Once she'd got off the plane and been taken to hospital, there was some problem with a sensor or something, and we couldn't take off again, so everyone had to stay overnight in this unexpected destination. Other passengers were not best pleased, and I could not sink far enough into my seat when this was announced. To add to this, the actual destination, which we reached the next day, was a resort that most of the passengers were going to, so I had to endure strangers calling me doc for the whole week. The lady got her hip sorted and sent me a lovely card once she got home. The flight crew were ace as well, and my partner and I got to visit the cockpit on the return flight. It was the same pilot and he remembered me. Thank you for watching AskReddit. Please like, share and subscribe.